Alright, with chapter 5 being out for 2 whole weeks, and me playing it for 3 times, and then a 4th time while writing the script, I can say this is probably one of the best chapters in the series. Not only did we get to see what the prototype looked like, even though it did hurt the height when I finally saw him due to it being leaked, it was still cool to see, not gonna lie. And on top of that, one of my favorite villains came back for chapter 6. I want to talk about what might happen in chapter 6. I think this is one of the most debatable topics from this chapter when it comes to whether these two characters are actually dead, even though I don't want it to be true, especially for Kissy Missy, my beloved. I think it's safe to say they're both truly gone. From the very beginning, these characters have through more pain than the average player. Huggy basically fell like 100 floors down in chapter 1. The head trauma alone basically would have killed him, but it didn't, which is more insane. And he's still alive. He's basically living in chapter 5 through bloodlust. Kissy Missy though, she's had it even worse. Honestly, it's almost amazing that she survived this long as she did. I don't expect her to be alive this chapter. She got into a fight at the end of chapter 3, possibly with Prototype or something else very interesting to talk about, which I will talk about in a bit. And then in chapter 4, we see her half-body burned into a rough condition, aka through chapter 3, what happened there, and at the chapter 4, we literally see her arm get ripped off by just trying to save us. So honestly, it's probably pretty safe to assume that they are both dead, and I'd rather not see them in chapter 6 because it would be hurtful. But I will say this though, if Kissy Missy somehow does survive by chapter 5, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that basically Kissy Missy has plot armor for some reason this whole entire game. While we play chapter 4, we hear Prototype Hunters a couple times, especially the one when you literally listen to the mixtape in the section with all the reanimals and stuff like that with the mixtape. These hunters were mentioned twice in this game and nothing more. It leaves the players to actually think what these are. For them to mention 100 means they will be in the next chapter. My belief is that Kissy Missy fought one of them in chapter 3, aka why she's burned, and there's no other explanation between two, because there was no fire when it happened. Whatever their intentions may be, all we know is that the Prototype is able to make his own experience very well. In fact, it's shown by Lily in chapter 5, because he made her literal proof of that. We most likely see them what comes into play. Until then, we would have to wait. This is probably gonna be my favorite thing to talk about in this video. I've always been a fan of side villains, similar to Samuel Lawrenson from Beneating the Machine, and right now, of course, Harley Sawyer. It's just one of those villains that you can't even hate, even if of the messed up things they've done. I mean, let's be honest, he's not the only one to literally ruin someone else's childhood, with that being said. I think they could do a lot of interesting things with Harley Sawyer in chapter 6. If they decide to bring him back with his vessels, it'll be very interesting with his animatronic body and stuff like that. Plus, it's going to be very hard to trust him in this game after he did try to kill us, of course. So, in chapter 6, he's most likely going to try to gain our trust. And then later on, stab us entering a whole new boss fight with all that stuff. I will say this though, there will be a couple ways he could interact with us though. Number 1 will be obviously probably the easiest route to do. He will obviously use the cameras and intercoms from what we've seen in chapter 5, and it will give him a lot of power to manipulate the building, similar to SCP-079, basically a very cool, smart computer SCP. That's a very degree, and if they go route, it will be interesting to see how much power he will actually have. The second one is probably the most comedic way, the entertaining way, and if you ever played Portal and you know a character named GLaDOS, they're gonna probably do a potato thing. Sort of similar to Globey, you just put him on there, and it would be very interesting to see him literally talk to a throughout the game with him just literally condescending us and just making very mean remarks, and I think I'd like chapter 6 way more if they do this, and it might be unexpected. And with all that saying, I think that's pretty much what I have on this video. I will say this, I appreciate what they did with chapter 5, and I cannot wait to see what happens with it, and it might be a year or two, but until then, I'll be waiting, looking for stuff. I'll see y'all later. See y'all on the flip side.